Welcome again to another online experience here at Pinnacle Church. If you're new, my name's Heath. I'm the lead pastor. And if you're been around for a long time, I guess you're saying welcome back to me, because the last 3 weeks, Caleb Simmons preached and then Peggy Simmons preached, and they all did amazing. But I'm back. And today, we're starting a new series called Making Change. We're going to spend the next 4 weeks looking at some principles that have to do with money, possessions, and the importance of tomorrow. And in that, we're going to look at 4 principles that we're going to be saying a lot through the series. And it's this. We're going to learn that less is more, stress is bad, giving is good, and tomorrow matters. What you do today has effects on tomorrow with your money and your possessions. And as we're getting into this series, I do want to give a shout out to Pastor Craig Rochelle and Life Church, because some of the material we're using, and definitely the theme, we've taken from them, and I got to give credit where credit's due, because that's important. So today, we're going to talk about this idea of less is more, which, if you think about it, is really countercultural to the society that we live in. Because as Americans, our entire society, our entire economy is built on what? Consumption. We are in a society that is constantly bombarding us with marketing messages. You're even marketed to when you don't realize you're being marketed to, and constantly bombarding us with to buy more, to get more, to accumulate more. We even sometimes will value our worth on, do we get more and more? And the question I want to say is more necessarily better? And it's what I call the gummy bear problem. Right now, you guys are going to learn something about me today. I love gummy bears, okay? I'm actually a gummy bear connoisseur, and some of you who love gummies, you're going to be like, Albanese is better, New Haribo is better, but whatever. But I'm a gummy bear connoisseur. So much so that my wife, one time, I told my wife, I said, you could blindfold me and I could tell the difference between different gummy bears and tell you what brand they are. And she said, I don't believe you. So she put me to the test and I passed. So here's the thing about a gummy bear, right? Can you eat just one? Now, I know some of you super weird, freaky people out there like, I can eat just one. Well, you're not normal, okay? But me, I open a bag of these bad boys, whether they're Haribo or Albanese, and I can never eat just one. And of course, in my mind, more is better when it comes to gummy bears, right? But is that good in life? Because a lot of times I think we treat a lot of the things we buy like they're gummy bears. We think I got to get more. I got to get more stuff. And is more better? Sometimes more is better. More love is better. More time with the people you love is better. More growing to be like Jesus is better. But more is not always better. I mean, think about it. Is more better when I am stressed out because I'm having to work overtime, or I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay the credit card off for the stuff that I've gotten, the more stuff I've gotten? More is not always better when I'm having to work so much, or I'm so stressed out about taking care of the stuff I have and spending time taking care of the large stuff I have that I don't have time to spend with the people I love. More is not always better when I'm so wrapped up by the accumulation of stuff that it actually harms my growth into being like Jesus. And more definitely ain't better when suddenly, because of my accumulation of more and more and more, when I perceive that someone is a threat to my stuff, I act in very un-Jesus-like ways to that perceived threat. So more is not always better. And sometimes less is more. And we're going to talk about that today, because a guy named Solomon in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, wrote what we call wisdom literature that is designed to give principles and stuff that makes you wise. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of talk about the whole overarching theme of that book is that life is sort of futile and you need to just live. But the futility comes from not having a life centered on the divine, centered around your Creator. And in that, he has something to say about this idea of over-consuming, of wanting more stuff. Ecclesiastes 4:6, listen to what Solomon has to say. He says, better one handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil. Now, I want you to think about, there's a metaphor here going on, right? And let's use the gummy bears example. He's saying it's better to have one handful than to have two handfuls. But at first glance, you're like, well, how is it better if I got one bag in one hand, then I got two bags, I got twice as many gummy bears, right? So why is it better? Because the metaphor here, you've got to know what he's saying here. He's saying it's better to have one handful, and here's the quantifier, with tranquility. Tranquility means to have peace. And what he's trying to get at here is that he's saying one handful symbolizes being content and not having to always get more. And the idea behind it is when we're content to have enough of what we need, we're content to have enough in one hand, then that brings about in our life tranquility. We can have peace. We can have peace of mind. We can have less stress. But then he's saying two handfuls, that's symbolic of you got more than you need. You got so much. Your hands are full. And he says with toil. Now, sometimes we can read the word toil. It's an old word. And you think about it, it means to work. And the thing is, Solomon is not anti-work. He's trying to show a balance. If you read the scriptures before this, he talks about two extremes. He talks about the person who overworks to get more and more and more, and the person who's lazy and does no work. And here he's shown the better way of saying, you do what you do, not to accumulate and overconsume, to just simply get what you can hold in the hand, but not to have the two and have the toil and the stress and the not peace that comes from constantly trying to accumulate and overconsume. And he says it's better. And one reason it's better, of course, is that we have tranquility and not toil. But another reason I think about is I want you to think about something. You ever been walking into a store, or you're walking out of a store, or you're walking in somewhere, you're walking to your house, or you're at work and you're carrying a load and your hands are full? Maybe even it's not just full with two like this. Your hands are full. You're overloading with a load. And you see someone and they need help. They need you to do something. What do you have to do? You got to drop the load, right? You have to drop it so that you can go and help them. And the idea here is if I have metaphorically both my hands full, i.e. I'm overconsumed with so much stuff in my life, I'm incapable of giving a helping hand out to somebody. I'm incapable of reaching out to a person. I'm incapable of doing really what matters. But the metaphor there is if I only have one handful, it's better because these are free and I can reach out and I can help my neighbor. And so the idea there, of course, is that's why it says better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil. But he adds something there at the end of the verse, and he says these words. He says, and chasing after the wind. What does he mean by that? This is a common phrase in the Hebrew Bible. It's a Hebrew phrase meant for the futility of a life chasing after things that can never satisfy. It can be a broad arching term. It can mean a life that is futile, that's not centered on a relationship with the divine, with God. And of course, when this was written, there was no notion of Jesus yet, but as Christians, we read the Hebrew Bible in light of Jesus, and so it's the futility of life without Christ. It can also mean the futility of trying to overconsume, the futility of striving and constantly needing more and trying to find your value in overwork or in things or things that just really can never matter. And so in the Hebrew term there it means to shepherd the wind, i.e. herding the wind. I think when I read that and thought about herding the wind, I thought about the old phrase, maybe you use it. You know, sometimes you'll talk about when you're trying to get your family together, trying to get them together for a family picture at Thanksgiving. And I was like, man, this is like herding cats. Because, you can't herd cats. Cats are going to do what cats are going to do because they're cats. But the idea there is it's the futility in this context of what we're talking about of trying to overconsume. It's like we're chasing the wind. And I feel like there's so much chasing after the wind in our society today. And every single person alive today in America is affected by it. If you are online, which most of us are, you watch television, you hear podcasts, you go analog and listen to radio, whatever. We are constantly being bombarded by messages that, as I said earlier, we need to consume more and more and more. And we get addicted to this dopamine high of accumulating more, of shopping, of buying. We have influencers who try to paint this life that's not a real life of what we need to buy. They're always pushing products. And if you get this, you're like me. And it's even down now to where I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day where there's kid influencers now where it's like, look at this, you need this skincare product for your kids, or you need to buy this, or here's they even do it with groceries now. And then if we can't, and so we then have this guilt that I can't buy that for a life that's not real. It's chasing the wind. And we even now, as a society, if we can't get our dopamine fixed because we can't go buy, we sit there and watch haul videos. Do you know what a haul video is? It's where we watch other people shop. We watch other people buy and unpackage stuff. And what we don't realize is when we're watching this person unpack, it's products of a product person who's paying them and they're getting money from, so they'll unpack their product. So then you will subconsciously be like, oh, I need to buy that. It's all chasing after the wind, and it's not satisfying, and it doesn't bring the tranquility that Solomon talks about in this verse. It brings the toil because we are overstressed and we are anxious and we are in debt up to our eyeballs, many of us, trying to accumulate more. And next week we're going to talk about debt. And I'm just as guilty as everybody else. I'm not sitting here telling you, you need to stop doing that. I'm saying we all need to stop doing it because there's something better for us. Listen, I'll give you an example, okay? I play this card game, and every so many months, or a couple times a year, they'll do these things called drops where they'll come out with a new theme. And they recently came out with a theme, and I bought some of the cards for that. And then they're dropping another theme, and it's based around the video game Final Fantasy. I have no emotion or even connection to those games. I never played those games, right? People who do, they probably would want those cards. But I get this email saying, you can pre-order now and you can get these cards. And suddenly in my mind, I find myself going, well, maybe I need to get these cards, man, because if I don't get these cards, then when I play other people, they may have a leg up because there might be some card in there that's super awesome. And I'm sitting here, and then I had to stop myself in my mind and go, wait a minute, dude. Recognize what's going on here. They're simply trying to hook you and sell you something so you will consume more. Do you need this? Nope. Stop chasing the wind. Jesus even had something to say about this. We go many thousands of years later when Solomon wrote this. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus is standing there and some guy yells at him and says, hey, master, tell my brother to split my inheritance with me. And Jesus says, who am I to judge over that? And then Jesus says these words. He says, beware. So be on your guard. Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Now notice what Jesus didn't say. Jesus didn't say, hey, be on your guard that you don't lose everything you've got. Because life is measured by how much stuff you have. That's not what he said, right? He said, no, guard against every kind of greed. Every kind. A lot of times when we think of greed, we immediately think of maybe that miserly person like Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Tale. It's like, all about his money and stuff. But greed can come in various different forms. And it is the one sin that can be most insidious in all of our lives, and we can all have a blind spot toward. Because it can take so many different forms. We can have greed over our time. We can have greed, as we're talking about today, about stuff. And we can say, I'm not a greedy person, but then maybe we look and we're like, but I do have a storage building full of stuff. And Jesus says the thing we need to hear here, he says, life is not measured by how much you own. I love the way the NLT puts that. The NIV says life does not consist of abundance of possessions, and i.e. it means life is not measured by how much you own. Some of us out there, maybe you need to hear this. Life is not measured about and of and on how much you own. Because often in this society, we value and put the value of people and individuals based on what they own. We will say, oh, we don't do that. That's not good. But we do it. And when we do it, some of us, because we will look and say, well, I don't have what my neighbor has. My kid doesn't wear the name brand that they do. We measure our worth on it. And then because we measure our worth on that, we will kill ourselves, starve ourselves, stress ourselves, take our peace away, put ourselves in debt because we think we have to have these things because our value is measured from it. And the way I see it, I'm not going to go off of what society tells me or a marketing firm that's trying to make money off of me. I'm going to go with the words of Jesus. And that brings me to a principle that I think we said less is more, but I want to add a word to that. Less is more living. Less is more living. What I mean by that is what we do is we stop the consumption. We understand I don't need to consume so much. Less is more because when I live by that principle of simplicity, that less is more, it means I get to do more living. I get to focus on the things that matter. Now listen, I'm not telling anybody don't have stuff, okay? I'm not sitting here saying we all got to be, some monk walking around in sandals with our head shaved, with a bowl out saying, give me my alms. No. But what I am saying is sometimes when you stop the overconsumption and you have less, it means one, you can have a few nice things. And two, it gives you the ability and the time and the mental space to focus on what matters. Because here's the deal. When you and I get to the end of our road, our life, I think we're going to agree that there's a lot of things we focused on, we strived for, we pushed for, we thought were so important, and a lot of it revolved around what we could consume and get and have. And when we get to the end, none of that's going to matter. What will matter is the relationships we had, the love we gave, the love we were given, the experiences, the memories. That's what will matter. And that leads me, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to go here in just a second. We're going to talk about two things that we can do to help us with this, real practical. But before we do that, let me ask you a question. What really matters to you? I mean, what really matters? Now, I have to ask this question about myself all the time because sometimes I can get focused on things. That card game that I love to play that's fun, sometimes I can get too I can't believe I'm telling you this. I can get too focused on a card game and lose track of time and not be down there spending time with my wife that matters. Because I'm up there going through my cards and looking at them and trying to formulate how to make this deck and do this. And I can zone out really quick. And then my wife comes in, are you going to bed? And I'm like, what? So I do it too. But what really matters? What matters? And as you ask that question, could it be that your stuff and the consumption of our stuff and the society that makes us think that it's normal to overconsume and that guilts us into overconsuming is really pulling us away from what matters most? Now, with that said, here's two things that we can do. Two things that we can do to help us begin to hold one in the hand and not two. Here's the first one. We got to cut back, man. Listen, like I said, the most meaningful things in life at the end of your life will not be your stuff. We accumulate, right? And so what I want to encourage us, including me, is maybe consider cutting back on what you consume. Cut back on the things we buy. Cut back on the stuff that we'll end up putting in the basement. Cut back on the things we'll use and then it ends up in the storage building. Because, we cut back. Why? Because your life is not defined by what you accumulate, but by what you value. And there can be a real freeing process when we're like, I'm going to start cutting back. And this can be difficult for us. I get it. But start cutting back. Here's the second one. Clear out. As we begin to cut back, we also need to take a look at cutting back is saying I'm going to cut back on accumulating, but we clear out as I take a look at what I have, and I have to say, maybe I need to clear out this stuff. I need to thin it out. I need to get simple. And I say that, and some of us immediately go, oh. And here's why. There's two principles at play there. One is scarcity, a scarcity mindset. If you grew up in an environment where you didn't have a lot, and then you get to the point where you can have a lot, you're financially able to do that, or you're still in that environment where you don't have a lot, you can have a scarcity mindset where you're always afraid, I will never have enough. And that's a valid way to feel. But the problem with that feeling is it also then means that we often will hold on to so much stuff, and always will come out in the words of, well, I might need that. And you're sitting there and you're looking at somebody's basement and you're like, why do you have that? I might need that. I'm like, dude, you ain't needed that in a decade. Get rid of it. It's taking up space. It's a scarcity mindset. The other flip of it that makes it hard to clear out is the sentimentality. Well, I got this thing and so gave this to me and I don't want to get rid of it. I'm, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but do you really need it? Somebody else could be using that. I can be very sentimental with things myself. There's a lamp and a pub mirror that we have carried around every time we've moved in the last 30 years because way back, or 25 years, no, more than 25 years. Way back in 1997, I went to a Pottery Barn and for my wife's birthday, and I bought this pub mirror and this lamp, and she likes them, but we've hauled those things around everywhere. So I get the sentimentality. But you got to ask yourself, do I need to hold on to all this? And in holding all this, what's it doing to my soul? I think a good practice to get into is the practice of if you get one, you give one. I don't always do this, but I do it with my t-shirts. I do it with clothes. I don't have a problem with clothes. My wife will come in there and be like, why do you have this bag of clothes to go to Goodwill? I'm like, well, I got these t-shirts, they need to go. And she's like, but you might, what? I'm like, no, I get a t-shirt, I get rid of a t-shirt. One thing is it can keep you current on your t-shirts, but you get one, you give one. Now, there is another area in my life where this is challenging for me, and as many pastors, and Craig Rochelle even talked about this when he did this material, is books. I'm a book hoarder, man. I got so many books, it's crazy. And some books, I use. There are certain books, my commentaries, books by authors I love. There's certain books that I will go back to over and over again. I will use them for messages. I will use them for things. But then there's a section of the books I look at, and I have them there, and I'm saying, I read that. Am I ever really going to read it again? And the answer is, I looked there, I'm like, you read that book 8 years ago. You're probably never going to read it again. Why are you using this? Maybe you need to give it away so somebody else can read it and benefit from it. You were blessed by this thing. Now give it away so someone else can be blessed by it. So, why do we need to do all this? Because at the end of the day, more stuff doesn't lead to more life. It often leads to more stress. It leads to more debt, which leads to more stress, more distraction, and really more dissatisfaction. Now, next week, we're going to talk about getting out of debt. But as we go into this week, as we think about this, as we think about, life with one handful or life with two handfuls, one is better. I need to cut back. I need to clear out because less is more living. As we think about that, I just want you to do two things. I want you to ponder that question, what matters most, as you look at your stuff. And I want you to think about and go ahead and think, what's one thing I can go ahead and clear out? I want to leave you with something. I watched a video. My wife sent it to me a few weeks back. It was of a lady. I think it was either the gram or I think it was Instagram. And she's walking and she's saying, she said, here I am, I'm in California. She said, I just moved my very elderly parents from a 3-story house down to a 1-level small cottage for them to live in. And she said, guys, I'm giving you this video because I want you to realize that some of the things that we think matter so much in life don't matter. She said, I just had to go through and clear out this 3-story house full of things. She said, when I was growing up, Mother had this silverware that we had to lock up. She said, lock the silverware up. Somebody will come in and steal my silverware. She said, guys, you want to know where that silverware that was so important is? Sits on the street corner out there in a box waiting with a sign, free to take. She said, all this stuff that was so important now, as they get to the end of their life, it's not important. She said, it's being sold. It's being taken to Goodwill. We're having people come in. We're giving it away. And she said, and here I am. I'm having to deal with all this stuff my parents accumulated that really was not important. And that really struck with me. One, I thought, wow, I probably need to get rid of a lot of books before I croak because I don't want Erica to have to deal with them. But the other thing it made me think of is we all need to take a hard look and be aware of what our society's pushing us to do. Why do we consume this? Why do I get value from the things I buy? And maybe it's really taking me away from what's really important. Let me pray for us, guys. Let's pray. Father, I'm grateful, God, that we have this wisdom, and it's old wisdom, God. So evidently this problem is not just an American problem or a modern problem, but Solomon would write this because even ancient people had the problem of always wanting more. Help us to be content with what we've had and what we have. Let us cultivate gratitude, Lord. And God, help us to see that what matters most is, one, do we have what we need? But two, how can we take all the energy we put into consuming into the things that matter, like relationships and love and experiences and memories? This is challenging, God, challenging for me. Help us, though, in the challenge to not have blind spots and to really see where we're at in this. And we thank you, Lord. And knowing that, God, it's through your grace that we can do many of the things we do to change because of what Jesus has done for us on the cross. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, thank you for taking time out of your very busy life, as I know all of us are. And next week, as I've said a couple of times in the message, we're going to be talking about debt. And you don't want to miss it. There's going to be some practical things. I hope it'll help you. If you know a friend that's struggling financially and debt's their big problem, have them come check it out. And another thing, if you do come and connect with us in person, we're starting a small group, a growth group, with this series. And you can go online and find some information, and we'll maybe have a link up here that you can sign up for this group where it's going to get really practical with things to help you if you find that this is finances and money and possessions is a big struggle for you. It's going to help you learn about, budgeting and just finances, investing, all those things that we all need. And it's going to go a little further than the series. And so I encourage you to do that. All right, guys, thank you for your time. As always, I like to say this: if you show up in person for the first time because you've been connecting like this, make sure you come and say howdy to me. And I will see you guys the next time we connect like this. I hope you have a wonderful week.